Hi, come on in, tune in, join us here. Thanks so much for coming in today. And we're going to be talking about all sorts of leadership, interesting, important issues with Fran Hauser. Don't miss this. She is an expert and a giver and a pioneer. Pardon me, in developing, this is live, so what happens live happens live. And she's requesting, so here we go. We're going to buffer for a moment. Hi, Jenny. Hi, Ola. Hi, the VA Psych Fairy. And here's Fran. We are ready to roll. So Fran, I'm going to be introducing the show and introducing you, and then we're going to be off and running. I'm so sorry. For some reason,
it always happens when you're live.
This is live, everyone.
Always.
This is live. So after getting ready for you all, so welcome to Disruptive Conversations with thought leaders, entrepreneurs, influencers, authors, educators, in which we deep dive into the experiences these women have needed to navigate and conquer in order to achieve personal and professional success. I'm Dr. Risa Ryger, clinical psychologist, and I'm an expert in change. Now, positive change can happen at any point, but in order for this change to happen, you need to disrupt. You need to disrupt thought, feeling, belief, habit in order to create your 10.0 life. And that's what this series of conversations is all about. And to help us in this process, I am delighted to introduce Fran Hauser. And what often happens is that the women who I have on as my very respected and esteemed guests have an extraordinary bio. So I've got to read from it because I can't remember it all. So Fran is an author, keynote speaker, and startup investor at the intersection of women's empowerment, career fulfillment, and collective well-being. Her career has spanned many different areas, and Fran takes the wisdom and wealth of information that she has gathered from being in all of these different places and brings them to us today. I do want to absolutely give a shout out to her first book and her second book. Wait till you hear the title of the first book if you haven't heard it yet. It is called The Myth of the Nice Girl: Achieving a Career You Love Without Becoming a Person You Hate. So how nice and being successful and achieving can go together. And her second book, Fran, do you have it? Here we go. Prop ready. Okay, Embrace the Work, Love Your Career. And she really does tell you how to do that step by step. And it is a go-to. It's a pick it up, go for it, and make it happen. Fran doesn't speak from, like, I woke up one morning and had this idea. Fran has been living it, putting it into action, teaching it to others, and really contributing to the success and benefits of everyone going forward that she's able to touch. And now she's here touching all of us today. So Fran, welcome. And what have I not mentioned about your bio?
Oh my gosh,
I think
you covered it.
About today?
Just long time in corporate, transitioned to startup investing, and now I really have this thought leadership practice around career development and women's empowerment. I've written the books. I do keynote speaking. So all you got it. You covered it.
Okay. I'm also going to add in that, for those of us, or for those people who are in a similar spot, that also to add to this is also momhood.
Yeah.
And that's another component that for some people is part of the picture, for some people isn't part of the picture, but there we have it. So Fran, what is it that you needed to disrupt inside of yourself in order to achieve the personal and professional success that you have achieved up to this point
You
in
know, I
time?
think a big part of it is really just kind of, for me, it was just owning who I am, and the whole nice girl persona, hence the myth of the nice girl. Very early on in my career, I was given like some pretty bad advice around, you need to toughen up, nice girls don't get the corner office, like you're not going to be successful. And what I realized was that there was so much power actually in being nice, because when you're nice, it allows you to develop really deep relationships with people. And in the business world, to be successful, it's all about relationships. So once I really like owned that, look, this is who I am. I'm a nice person. I'm compassionate. I'm empathetic. And I started feeling really comfortable with bringing all of that to work and not checking those qualities at the door, but really showing up as who I am as a human being. I think that was really kind of a big moment for me in terms of just unleashing my true potential.
Yeah, there's so much
Yeah.
mythology about that. You call it the myth of the nice girl. And I think that that language is absolutely so crucial, because what the idea is about nice is that somehow if you're nice, it means that your brain power is like
Hmm.
at a 0.002, and that you don't have backbone, and that you can be stepped over. And you came in and you've been a disruptor in this area. So could you speak to that
Yeah,
a
I
little
think
bit
there's
more,
there's a big
please?
difference between being nice and being a pushover, or being nice and being a people pleaser. And so I think it's super important to know that there's a difference, and to see, like, if you're kind of moving into that people pleasing territory, which, by the way, a lot of us do, right? Like, it's really easy to go there. It's important to be aware of it and to set healthy boundaries. Like a big thing for me over the years has been, when it comes to boundary setting, like really learning how to say no to things, to requests that aren't aligned with my priorities or my values. Because when you're people pleasing, right, you default to yes. You just want to say yes all the time. So something that I've really had to be aware of is, um, when I get that inbox request, is to be really thoughtful about, okay, is this really a yes or is this a no? And I did some research around this, Risa, around like why we have such a hard time saying no, especially why we have such a hard time saying no.
Mm,
And like 15 different reasons came back, but the two top ones were people pleasing and FOMO. People pleasing and FOMO. So just being like really aware of those two things, because if you're in either one of those modes, it's just harder to say no.
yes, yes. One of the things that I know about you, and we'll get to our how we connected, which is also very important, an important part of who you are, is that saying no, no can happen in all different ways. And one of the things I write about is that honesty without
Mhm.
compassion is cruelty, right? And so when you're saying no, that it doesn't have to be,
Mm,
no doesn't mean that it's brutal. No doesn't mean that you're stomping on someone's heart and
yeah.
you're not stomping on their life. So, how have you figured out ways of saying no
Yeah.
that are
Right. You
in
can say
alignment
no
with you?
kindly, like still be direct, but do it in a way that's kind. And, for me, I always say, like, I'll always start a no by saying thank you. No, thank you for thinking of me.
Yes.
Right. Thank you for extending the invitation. Um, I then might say, look, I'm heads down working on whatever it is that I'm working on. So I won't be able to participate at this time, but please keep me in mind for the future. And I wish you all the best. Like, it's two lines. Sometimes I think people feel like they have to write 3 or 4 paragraphs to justify their no, right? Like, but you really don't. You can just keep it short and sweet. And the other thing I'll tell you, putting on my like startup investing hat, that I've heard from
Mm,
founders, is they appreciate a fast no. When they're pitching their business and they feel like an investor is like stringing them along, you know, like I might invest, I have to think about this, I have to do more due diligence, I have to pull in the stringing them along, they would actually, the founder would actually rather just get a fast no so that they can move on. So there's actually something really kind about giving the no, right? As opposed to stringing along.
Yeah, that's, it's so important in our relationships, in our parenting, in our work, because when you don't give the no, people think that that the door is open. And
Yeah.
so they're going to
Yeah.
go for
Or you
it,
know what else I
as they
found? If you
should,
give too
right?
much information, like in your
Right.
no, then they're going to pick something out and they're going to try to negotiate with you. So that's why, like, it just keep it short and sweet.
Yeah. And what I love about what you're saying is also that it's also true. It's authentic. I mean, you're not coming
No.
up with some sort of pat something. You're saying, I'm underwater at this time. I have a lot of
Thank you.
obligations. Thank you. You start with thank you for thinking of me. And that doesn't take,
No,
that
it
doesn't
really
cost you
doesn't. And thank you is
anything.
so much more powerful than I'm sorry, which is what we tend to start with when we're saying no, right? It's like, I'm so sorry I can't make it. Or instead it's like, no, thank you. Thank you. There's so much positivity in that phrase. So it's just, I feel like it's like such a beautiful way to start the response.
Yes. So a takeaway for our community listening and those who are going to be listening in is that no isn't brutal. It's not like you're taking a club and you're knocking somebody over the head with it. That no is
Mhm.
something that happens in life. That life isn't just a road of yeses. And so when you're able to give a no, you're also learning how to
Yeah,
take a no.
absolutely. And it's, look, I just did a whole talk this morning on work-life balance. And how many
Mm,
how many of us are struggling with going back into the office 3 days a week, 4 days a week, and or 5 days a week,
or
right?
five.
And organizations are they're still figuring it out, and it's been a really difficult transition for people. And a lot of what we talked about was setting those boundaries, right? When it comes to work-life balance, it's setting those healthy boundaries, and having the confidence to say no is a big part of that.
So when you talk about boundaries,
Yeah.
there are certain words that we hear a lot about, and boundaries is one of those words. So could you
Yeah.
shed some wisdom
I mean,
onto
this is how I think
boundaries?
about boundaries is when I think about like what my priorities are in life, right? Across all different parts of my life, work, parenting, relationships, self-care, right? All of it. I have my priorities and I'm very clear about what they are. Like these are the areas where I want to spend my time. So it's important for me to protect those priorities. So I actually picture like
Mm.
setting boundaries around my priorities. That's the way that I picture it. I'm like very protective of them, which means that I really need to be protective of my time and my energy. So, it's everything. Setting a boundary is everything from saying no to even just like the way that I work. Like I don't answer emails after a certain time, or if you need to get a hold of me, and it's urgent, the best way to do that is by texting me or whatever your ways of working are, right? I feel like those are all boundaries. And I'm actually encouraging people that are going back to work, in person, to work with their teams to create boundary plans, right? Like they can, so that everybody's on the same page in terms of like, what's the best way for us to work together so that we could create the most value for the organization. And a big part of that is what are our boundaries as a team?
That's that's so important in that also when you're a leader and you're creating boundaries and you're helping your team create boundaries, the messaging is so profound in that I care about you. Well, first of all, you're talking about yourself, which is that
Yeah.
Boundaries are important. I'm setting up boundaries. It's not about saying no to you. It's about being able to accomplish. I'm helping you set boundaries because I value you, and that it becomes this very that's positive feedback engine of understanding that, what do people want? People want to
Yeah.
be heard, they want to be seen, they want to be
Yeah.
valued. And that's
Yeah.
intrinsic in this
You're
messaging. You don't have
modeling
to
it.
say it,
That's the
you're
thing as a
doing
leader, right?
it.
You're always modeling it. You're modeling the behavior. So I think that is because it's really confusing to employees when their manager like says one thing and they do another. It's really, really confusing. Like somebody said to me once, like, and this is, I think this is so profound that one of the most important characteristics of a leader is consistency. Consistency, right? Their actions are consistent with their words. They don't show up as like one person one day and a different person the next day. That's really confusing. It's really hard to work for someone like that, right? So yeah, consistency is is
Mm-hmm.
is huge.
So when you're talking about setting boundaries, setting priorities, getting clear about that for yourself, it seems that what you're doing is that you're showing up with consistency. You're showing up with consistency for you, and therefore it winds up being consistency for other
Yes.
people as
And
well.
I know myself. Like if I'm not setting healthy boundaries, then I start feeling off balance and I start feeling off kilter. And then guess what? Then I don't have the emotional capacity to be there for other people. That's when I know that I'm off balance is if I feel like um, I can't take on one more person's problems. Like what do you ever get like that where it's like I just can't take on one more thing? Like I'm like at my capacity, but that's usually because if I'm feeling that, it's usually because I'm off balance. And maybe I'm not setting the healthy boundaries. So it's a big part of it.
And sometimes what happens also is just like life
Yeah.
keeps knocking at our door and different demands. And so there are times when
Yeah. And
there is too much.
where you have to
There are
like
times,
let people
yeah,
help you, it's like there are a lot of times where like life gets really hard and you just you can't do it alone. And it's like having that support system, whether it's at home, whether it's at work, like not being afraid to ask for help. um it's really important, and sometimes it's hard, right, because it makes us feel vulnerable or for whatever reason. But I always say that I always talk about like having your dream team. And I think it's really important. Like usually you have like those 5 or 6 people that right, you can go for that, you can go to them, and you might go to them for different things. but they're your rocks.
yeah. So, Fran, in looking at what you've done, and you've been in the corporate world and you've morphed in so many different ways, what was it that happened inside of you that you knew
Yeah,
it
I've
was time to make
pivoted
the
a handful of
change?
times in my career, and I think one of the biggest pivots I made was leaving corporate Time Inc., where I was president of digital. I had been there for 10 years. It was a big,
Wow.
big job, big
Yeah.
job. Great job. I loved my time there. But I left that world to go into startup investing and really to work for myself. And that was 11 years ago now. And it was the scariest move that I've ever made because I left a company and a platform where I could pick up the phone and call anybody and get a call back, because I was affiliated with People Magazine and In Style and Entertainment Weekly and Time, right? These big, huge media brands. And I was really afraid of leaving and now like counting on just like my own personal brand, you know? Um, but I think the biggest thing in that moment that really allowed me to make the change and disrupt was that I knew I needed to make a change for my family. My kids were 3 years old and 18 months at the time. And I just felt like I wasn't
Yeah.
spending enough time with them. I was getting home super late. I was taking the train in, you know that it's that slog. And I
Yeah.
was really tired. My husband and I had worked really hard to have this family. You know, both of my boys are adopted. And I just remember kind of like waking up one day and going like, what am I doing? Like, you know, we worked so hard to have this family.
Yeah.
So I really felt compelled to create a professional life for myself that would give me the flexibility to be there for my kids. And and I knew at that time that, you know, a big part of my job working in digital at the company was meeting with startup founders. So I got to meet like the Rent the Runway founders before they launched, the Skim founders, you know, all of these amazing people that were launching these new business models and these new products. And so I really became entrenched in the startup world. And it was something that I really enjoyed, you know, and I really felt like, wow, like I could really be helpful to these people, not just by writing checks and investing in them, but also by advising them. So I actually started doing it as a side hustle. So the last 2 years that I was at Time, I was angel investing and advising. And it was my way of kind of seeing like, okay, do I like this? Like, could I see myself doing this full time? And I ended up loving it and I ended up, you know, making the move. But I think there is something to kind of learn there in terms of like planting the seed and starting small. Because I think it would have been just like really risky for me to just say, hey, I'm leaving, peace out. I'm going to go start this, you know, angel investing, startup investing practice without really knowing, like, am I really going to enjoy it? Is it really going to be fulfilling? So I'm a huge fan of the side hustle.
Mhm. So, two highlights that I want to make here, which is that one is that your idea of success at one point in time doesn't necessarily mean that that has to be your picture of success forever. That it's important, and it sounds like this is what you did. You reevaluated, like, what does success mean to me, and that you can shift and you can shift at different points in time. And so that's one takeaway. Another takeaway, and then I want you to jump back in. This is really for our communities, is that
Mm.
you know, it doesn't have to be all or nothing. You created a side hustle so that you were in the, you
Yeah,
know, you were in the water and seeing what
yeah,
that felt like
yeah.
for you.
I
So
I look, I think it's really daunting when you think about making a change that's that big of a change, right? That's a big change. Like for me to leave media, C-suite job, and go out on my own. That's a really scary, big change. So the idea of kind of like testing the water, you know, dipping your toe in, um, I just think there's a huge amount of value in that kind of approach. And I continue to do that. I continue to be the person that's like planting the seeds, you know, like whether it's now with like my book coaching, you know, it's like I just like just something that's interesting to me. Let me try it. Let me see, is there a business there? You know, do I like it as much as I think I'm going to? So I really love the idea of planting seeds. And I also love what you said about redefining success because as you go through life, you know, your definition of success will change. You know, very early on in my career, I just really wanted to get to the corner office. That was like a big thing for me. You know, I was ambitious and it was something I was really excited about. And I'm so glad that I accomplished that. You know, it meant a lot to me. It still means a lot to me. It was a very rewarding, you know, experience. But then things change, you know, and that's great. And I feel like I've now created a very rich, abundant, you know, not, and when I say rich, I'm not talking money, you know, I'm talking about like just a life where I can decide who I'm going to work with, what projects I'm going to get involved with. I mean, I just feel like there's like it's just such a blessing, you know, to be able to be there at this point in my life and in my career.
before we need to wrap up, I must give a shout out to networking and how important networking, as you were saying at the beginning, that building relationships is everything. Building relationships is how you get your email answered, your phone call returned. That's what it's all about. And that we met through, I saw what you were doing. I thought she's just amazing. And had somebody connect us, and then we took it from there. And so that networking, when people hear the word, they're like, it just seems like too daunting. And so what's the wisdom that you can bring to networking, otherwise
building
known as
right? I know
building
that
relationships?
the networking word can get really icky. I get that. I honestly did not realize the importance of networking until like the middle part of my career. Like very early on in my career, I was so focused on doing the work, like heads down, doing the work, just doing great work. And what happened was I was working at Time Inc. Time Inc.'s part of Time Warner, so you have all these different divisions. Time Warner did this women's leadership summit where they invited women from each of the divisions to attend. It was such an incredible experience. There were like 50 of us. And this was my aha moment with networking, was this incredible woman, Pat Philly Crucial, who was the number 2 to Jeff Bewkes, who was the chair of Time Warner. Pat was up there and somebody asked her, how did you accelerate in your career so quickly? And she said, my network. And what she said was, and I remember my jaw like dropping, she said she would do 2 networking meetings every single day. So she might do like a breakfast and then like a walk in the afternoon, or a lunch and a drink. And building out her network was just such a huge priority for her. And it was the reason why, like those relationships, those connections, like that was why she was able to get, to where she got. And I just remember sitting there going, okay, I need to pay more attention to this. I need to prioritize this. I'm not going to do 2 a day because I can't. That's like so overwhelming. But what if I just committed to like 1 hour a week? What if I committed to meeting 1 new person a week? And I just set a goal for myself of meeting 50 new people over the course of the year over coffee. And I have to tell you, Risa, like it's something that once I started doing it, it just did come so naturally to me, because I really do love people and I love making connections. And picking my head up from that computer and like going out into the world and actually like talking to people and getting to know people, by far like the single most important thing that I could have done in my career. Because when I'm talking about making these pivots, I could not have made these pivots without these people to support me. If I didn't have those connections with startup founders when I was at Time Inc., and even with other investors, right? Like they helped support my transition. They opened up their networks to me, right? They opened doors. They introduced me to founders. They helped me get deal flow. Like, so it's, connections are everything. Relationships are everything. So it's if you walk away with nothing else from this conversation, I would just really encourage you to prioritize it. And just like Risa did, like she found me on social media. She thought I was doing some things that were interesting. She found a mutual connection, and the rest is history, right? So here we are.
Here we are. Yes. What a joy it is. So, Fran, what's your next disruption?
I really believe that my next disruption is around book publishing. It's around, and I know, Risa, this is something that's near and dear to your heart as well.
As I'm writing
your
my book proposal,
like,
and
book publishing is a very complicated ecosystem. Like there's lots of different ways to get your book published, but there's also a lot of gatekeeping, and it's like really hard to get in. And so what I've been spending some time doing is like just really trying to be helpful to people who want to get, their book out into the world, and really educating people on how book publishing works and how to navigate it and what the right path might be for them, and opening up my network and, being helpful. And my gut is that this is going to turn into something bigger. Like I'm doing this right now in a coaching sort of way in my workshops. But I just have this like feeling that like, I feel like it's going to end up turning into something bigger, more expansive, more disruptive. So I don't know exactly what it is yet, but I'm really excited to find out.
And that's part of the beauty of making change, is that you don't know necessarily exactly what it's going to look like, but you're in the process, you're in the game, you're making it happen. And I can't thank Fran enough for coming on, sharing her precious time, which it is, and her wisdom, her experiences of all of these years, and what she brings to the table each and every day, and the compassion and commitment that goes along with that. So you can find Fran on Instagram, you can find her on LinkedIn, whatever you do, just find her and stay connected with her. I know that I do. And so we're going to be ending this week's Disruptive Conversations. Until next week, remember that positive change can happen at any time. And now Fran and I are going to take our end Photoshop. Okay, so a little fluff,
Yeah.
Okay, all right, so you ready?
Sure.
One more.
Thank you so much for having
See
me.
you
You're such a
soon.
joy, and I
So
loved all the
great.
comments. Thank you to everybody who joined. I don't know if you were noticing, Risa, but so many
Oh,
sweet,
yes,
lovely,
absolutely.
positive comments. So thank you. Thanks to everyone.
Yes, join up, follow me. Follow me. I'm dropping information every week. I don't want you to miss it. And if you have friends who could benefit from this, also let them know. That's how we get word out. So thanks so much, and see you next time.